Hello and welcome to my fourth Python programming tutorial within the series. I actually decided to name this series Through the Eyes of a Student. I wasn't sure if I wanted to name it at all, but I thought giving it a name would make it a little more unique, and I figured this is a interesting situation that I wanted to make people aware of. So I may have lied a little bit either within my last video or the video before that, saying that the only two functions we'll be using in the next few videos are the input and print functions. Well, opposed to that, we're actually going to be learning four new functions today, but they're relatively simple then, or they're really easily learned, so we don't have to worry too much about going in anything complicated. So the first thing I'm going to do is open up the idle as normal, and I'll just be using the shell to explain how these functions work. So the first function I want to show you is just called the type function, and basically what it's mainly used for debugging purposes, or from what I can tell at this point. So I don't think you'll use it too much within your actual program unless you're trying to do some debugging. But the way it works, it ties into the other three functions I'll be talking about. So let me just give you a little idea of how it works. So say I want to make a variable, make the variable age and set it to 12. So age is equal to 12. All right, and now say I call the type function, and within the type function I will put age. What it actually does is it will call out whatever your object that you put within the function. It'll tell you what class it belongs to. And in this case, 12 being a number or an integer, it's calling back the int. It's calling back int, saying it's within that class, which is 12. So if I were to, let's just to show you a little better. So what if I say age is equal to something like this, I guess, and then do the type function again, and then call back age. As you can see, it changed. So it changed from this to this, from int to str or stir, which, as you probably could guess, is string, because it is now a string. All right, there is one more that I will show you that is you may or may not be familiar with. We haven't discussed it in this tutorial series at least, but so let's say I assign age to 3.14, and now let's see what happens. All right, so now it's a float, or a floating number, which when you see float, all you have to think of is decimal point. So it's just a decimal point. All right, and so you're probably thinking, how can this be useful to you besides debugging and trying to figure out what an object is or what class an object belongs to? So I will actually show you a few examples of how this can work, or especially these three, which are also functions, not just class types, which I will go into in a moment. So what I'm going to do actually is open a new file, and I want to show you how they can be reassigned in an actual program. So the first thing I'm going to do is, we've been using the age scenario, so let's just go with that. So age is equal to 12. Let's say that. Actually, let's make it so it's a user input. So age is equal to input, then how old are you? I'll do it like that, and I'll just have it print off something simple like, let's just print the age for now. All right, so I'm going to run this just to give you an example of how this is going to work. And I don't know, I'm just going to name it test. All right, and it outputs how old are you. So I'll just put, let's just put 12. And it outputs the age like I wanted it to. However, let me show you something. something interesting. So if I were to run it and ask my age, what if I were to put 12 like this? Just write it out. Well, what do you know? It writes out 12. All right, what if I just hit my keyboard? Okay, so I think you kind of see what I'm getting at. How can we fix that? So if I want, say I want the age that the user inputs to be, as you can probably guess, an integer, all I would have to do is call the integer or the int or int function, and it will assign to that object. So int, and then I'll put this entire object within the int function. So it's now within it. So all it's doing, if you put it beforehand, it's assigning this as an integer. It's so it's assigning the input as an integer. So the user will have to put in an integer, or it won't be accepted. And just to show you this, do this one more time. So how old are you? Let's just type 12 like I did previously, and now as you can see, it's not accepted. So if I were to actually type a number, 6, now it lets me type it in because it's assigned as an integer. Alright, so this also works for other scenarios. So you remember the float? So that's also a function. So if I put all of this within a float, as if you can recall, a float is a decimal point. So if I put it all within a float and then type my age, let's just put 12. As you can see, it puts it as a decimal point instead of just 12. So if I were to use the str, which is also a function, what do you think would happen? As you can probably guess, this is a string, and if you can recall from our functions and variables tutorial video, integers can also be strings. So if I put in an integer, theory, it should still work because an integer can be a string. Alright, so there are other scenarios into where we can alter the function type or the object type back and forth depending on what you want for the input and then how you want it to output. You can they can be two separate things depending on how you want it, which I will be going over in a future video when we're learning how to create a different program. But for now, that should show you at least how to set certain objects as to whatever type you would like. So a string or an int integer or a float, and the same can be said towards the print. Like if you wanted this to be, which like I said, I'll explain. I'll just go over it in a future video. That should be it for now for function types and changing function types. So see you next time.